Okay. Prologue, and out of good still to find means of evil. Hell, a fake remaining corner of the primeval darkness, Satan alone. His figure becomes gradually visible, outlined against the blank blackness, and by the dim grey light which emanates from it, or more properly of which it consists. He is seated at one of the long empire sofa, very much in the pose of one of Michelangelo's Medici dukes.
Medici.
Medici. Oh yeah.
Medici is Italian.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Medici dukes, resting one arm on his knee and his chin on his hand, deep in weary and mysterious meditation. A brief silence, during which Satan's figure becomes, while remaining dim and disembodied, a little more visible, showing that he is dressed very much like that Michelangelo's statue shadowy wings seem folded behind him. Knocking is heard, and a strange bark as of several wolves, three different notes make a kind of chord. Satan. Another bore. This endless interviewing of silly human passions is enough to spoil the pleasure of my great coming performance, my ballet of the nations. I thought I had given instructions to all my personnel and might enjoy a half an hour of solitude and silence, for Satan, though lonely, is never let alone. Well, let Cerberus detain him at my doors. The barking approaches, and which is it at length heard, the voice, a fine rolling contra alto of Clio, muse of history.
Oh. Down, Cerberus, down. Good dog. Good little dog. It's only its old friend Cleo who has brought it a nice little sup. Really, what it is, of honey lies.
The muse of history, I had quite forgotten our appointments. There she is, irreclaimably classic and never forgetting his plastic poses, indiscreet beyond all other immortals, and of course an hour before her time. Still, my performance needs her reporting, and although she is a fool of the first water, she had rubbed shoulders in her professional capacity with so many celebrated persons that she may muster as intelligent. Since she has cost me my brief moment of privacy, let me amuse myself a little by mystifying her. The barking has ceased. Enter the muse with the marble impetuously of the victory of Sacramentas, and very angry in an operatic way. She does not recognize Satan in the dark.
Insolence, I call it. I tell you, I am invited to attend your master, and you shall answer to him, whoever you are, for having kept me waiting out here with Cerberus. Hello, you there in the dark? Tell me, Lord Satan, that Cleo waits upon him. Cleo, muse of history, not to be mistaken for that newfangled impostor who makes free with my name to retain vulgar details about laws and institutions and the price of food. Cleo, real muse of real history, sister of tragedy and the impassioned lyric, and dealing only with deeds heroic, elevating, and most often destructive.
All right, all right, all right. Don't be flustered. No one would ever mistake you for anything scientific, my dear Cleo. The muse taken aback.
The voice of Satan himself? Oh, forgive me, Prince of Darkness. Your kingdom seems even less well lit than usual after the garish modern world. Oh, I thought I had to do with some attendant fiend new to the service. Why, even Cerberus himself scarcely knew my voice.
Satan has risen and shakes hands. A thousand apologies, dearest muse. The fires of hell have long been extinguished, for no one took them seriously in these godless days. Your precarious eyes will grow more accustomed to this dear primeval darkness, and after my coming ballet, the lights of earth will no longer offend you. Even there gloom and a touch of chaos will prevail. But come, let us have a look at each other, my excellent old friend. Satan increases his ominous light, which emanates from his person, and is revealed like a impetuous moon, thinly veiled in clouds, beautiful, archangelic, without age or sex, all powerful, omniscient, sad, but with much sense of humor. Satan, pointing to the other corner of the empire sofa, Come, sit opposite where I can look at you, dear old Cleo. I'm glad to see you quite unchanged. Classic even to the invariable key pattern of your hem. The same majestic embroiderment like some ample bosomed prima donna in a Wagner opera, but with the incomparable contralto, luscious but rolling, suitable to handle, and not aged a bit.
You are too good, my lord, and your ancient friendship does not see the ravages of time in my poor wrinkled face.
Cleo takes out a powder puff and applies it with a frank and delicate grace.
But as my lord, Satan of all creative and created forces alone maintains unblemished youth.
Satan shakes his hand. The muse, anxious to make herself agreeable after the gaffe committed on entering, looks around her for something to say.
How truly restful is not this ancient place, the ideal retreat, I always say, for one uniting in his person action, thought, and fancy.
Satan bows one hand on his heart. A good old place. The only bit still left to keep the void and darkness whence life and light arose to plague me and be plagued by me. You know it well of old. But such as the regrettable compromises with error to which professional men of letters and even muses are obliged, that you yourself, I notice, have more than once described this house of quiet brooding evil as peopled with the myriad damned who encumber the world above with their dead carcasses and equally offensive living souls, to think that poets and divines have packed these restful solitudes with brimstone flames, bogs of boiling mud, lakes of ice, of viewless winds, all crammed with garrulous deceased humans. Little did I guess, when I made all the moralist vindictive, that not being satisfied with what Satan makes of earth, this vindictiveness would intrude feeble copies thereof into his own dwelling, whence he sends evil to suffer and avenge itself above.
Too true, alas, my lord. The literary trade is frequently obliged to make truth acceptable by standing it on its head. For instance, put what people call hell below when it is so visibly above. The earth's surface time is after death when it is obviously present during life. But misrepresentations of this trifling kind are crumpled rose leaves in the arch fiend's back. And forgive the indiscretion of so old a friendship. You seem a little depressed today. Anything gone wrong?
Oh no, everything as it should be, evil hatching everywhere, and in another hour, triumphant though one half of earth, I am only bored. But that is not unusual with me.
Bored, my dear Lord Satan. Why, you have invited me to report the very greatest performance you have ever staged.
Yes, yes, I truly think the finest. By the way, did you pass on my invitation to the ages to come?
I have, my lord. They will be here in good time.
That's right. They shall have front stalls, for they are more appreciative than the virtues of our audience, who always fall asleep when the performance offends their principles. But as to you, your seat is next to mine, as beseems the great recording muse. The muse claps her hand in delight.
Oh, dear Lord Satan.
We are very old friends, Cleo. What would history have to record but for the doings of Satan? And save your very talents what memory would there be for evil deeds? But come, let us have a little chat, dear old muse. There is still half an hour till the bell rings and we go aloft. Except your disembodied friends, the ages to come, no one will have admittance here below. Some of the virtues would doubtlessly enjoy seeing my quiet home, but this thin, dehumanized atmosphere makes them cough. And as to our orchestra of human passions, they are always in training, and it is the ballet master's duty to summon them in time. All else is ready. I need scarce remind you that the real preparation for this new ballet of mine began long ages back, one might almost say with the first wars, which, making men afraid, taught them to bring on aggression by their precautions for self defense. so that the necessary pretexts and arguments for hatred have like the painted scenery of an earthly playhouse accumulated on my hands from age to age, ready to shift from side to side. Thus, in the coming ballet, you will recognize, not without amusement, the selfsame insults against Britain's whilom comrades in arms, which Burke and Pitt have used against Britain's present day allies, the once frog eating systematic murderers called French. And now the scene shifts to the press and cabinet are busy above. Listen, listen, you can just hear the hammering. And the armament mongers have sent in all the last millinery.
And how is Ballet Master Death, your gifted son?
My nephew, if you don't mind, dear Cleo, prejudice, prejudice is sacred in my eyes, and I should hate to be the cause of scandal to my weaker brethren. You ask, how is Ballet Master deaf? Oh, well, we all grow old, and he never had a good constitution to begin with. And then perpetual worry. All those doctors and social reformers spoiling his sport and almost throwing him back on meteoric horrors, shipwrecks and earthquakes and such like.
Yes, indeed. We have had a dull time of it, and a difficult one, in that bourgeois Victorian age, with people talking of peace, retrenchment, and reform, and even practicing them a little. But this new century has brought back a nobler and more ideal way of thinking. Mankind is getting once more to recognize that man cannot live by bread alone.
Just so. His mortal digestion is apt to become torpid from protracted peace and plenty. Then man requires the heroic remedies of primitive medicine, vitalizing lies, alcoholic syrup of catchwords wherein to swallow such materia medica as Motherlands blush to mention, fastings and bloodlettings, drastic purges as Aristotle prescribed, by terror and pity, and such upsetting of the whole circulation as spiritual diversions, and flagons employ in order to restore the zest of life. Forgive my coarseness, dear muse of history. It is no longer every day I can converse with refined intellectuals like you. Philosophers and poets do, of course, join enthusiastically in my shows when, as in the coming ballet, the orchestra of patriotism is engaged. But at other moments my work lies more and more with prejudice and dullness. If boredom were not part of Satan's doom, I sometimes think I should die of it, dear muse. The muse in her finest manner.
Boredom is surely the nemesis of all great eminence in this mediocre universe.
No, most amiable of sycophants. Satan is always bored, not through excess of greatness, but for a different reason.
A different reason, indeed. Is it presuming on your friendly condescension and the intense interest which history has always taken in what pertains to evil? Is it indiscreet to ask what kind of reason?
Satan's table talk by one who knows him, eh? Don't deny it, Cleo, you yourself already as my Boswell. The muse modest but intensely delighted.
Oh, my lord, my ambition never soared.
Why not? Milton and Goethe and thousands of divines and moralists have published so many spurious accounts of me that I might as well once in a way give the world a little correct information about my humble self. To do so with help will serve to while away the half hour still remaining until the curtain rises on my new ballet. So let us talk, dear Cleo. Are you comfortably seated? Satan shoves a footstool beneath the muse's feet.
Oh, so thoughtful for his friends, our dear Lord Satan.
Well then, Satan is bored because he never feels love.
At large, not having the advantage of such delightful experiences as mine, has indeed always taxed your lordship with, shall we say, a trifling lack of loving kindness.
And correctly, that however is not my meaning. There are other kinds of love than loving kindness, Cleo. Although the self righteousness of loveless moralist has talked as if that love of your neighbor, country, enemy, love of the poor by those who are well off, were the only kind of love.
We are not moralists, my lord, but men and women of the world.
Oh, that is not what I am driving at. No allusion to the daughters of men whom the sons of God found fair, and such like gossip. The notion that real love must be illicit, or at all events such as the virtuous persons hide away in modest alcoves, is merely the inverted prudery of silly moderns. Love does not comprise at all, whether preached from the pulpit or whispered with a wink, but love is something larger and transcends human relations, though it takes its name from them. Love not merely of creatures, but of anything else, places, employments, aspects, ideas, and aims. Love, which means attraction, attachment, preference, the power of delighting in whatever it may be, the mother's delight in her children, the thinker's in his problems, the poet's and the child's in a bare sense and spectacle of life, the plain man's in all his sad plans and prospects. That is love, love in the widest sense, and that is denied me. You noticed I was bored. The secret of that internal boredom lies in this. Satan, my dear old interviewer, though in all else omnipotent, is impotent at one point. He cannot take delight. A pause. The muse does not know what she ought to say. Satan cannot love anyone or anything. Satan's only manner of possessing, but he has fashioned half mankind in his own jealous image, is to deny delight or use to others. For him, the sense of power comes not in making, understanding, or loving, but only in spoiling. Shall I tell you what I am?
I should esteem it a great favor and of inestimable advantage to my future work if you would, my lord.
Then listen, Cleo. I am the power that wastes. Being unable to use, I render useless. Taking no pleasure in fruition, I smite with bareness, and more is precious and rare and sorely needed. The more I waste, whatever it may be, earth and time's opportunities or of joy and betterment, man's life, man's labor, and man's thought, but most of all man's goodness, so that Satan's truest name might be the waster of human virtue.
How deeply interesting. I trust it may not be presuming too much on your kindness to ask your lordship for an instance or two, an illustration of the above remarks.
Willingly, willingly, and since you are a muse wearing a key pattern, genuine classic on your frock, you shall have an instance of from Homer. You must correct me if my memory plays tricks with the quotation. It is Achilles speaking, "Farewell, Patroclus, even in the house of Hades I am now doing all that I have promised thee. 12 sons of noble Trojans shall the flames consume along with thee. But dogs, not fire, shall devour the flesh of Hector, son of Priam."
I don't quite grasp your illustration, dear Lord Satan. That was cruelty. The wolf not quite purged the way out of primitive man. Nothing was being wasted.
Do wolves butcher prey which they cannot eat, in order to revenge some other dear dead wolf? No, such virtue is human.
Virtue, my lord?
Surely loyalty to the dead, one of the virtues I greatly enjoy spoiling, and a virtue which, far from being purged away from modern man, is about to furnish me some sublime effects. But I will not forestall my ballet, except to tell you that one of its main motifs is its levied motifs is, as Wagnerians say, is my dealing with just such virtue. The sweet and ardent loyalty of noble lads ready to die themselves and kill other noble lads, lest their comrades should have died in vain. Loyalty also which makes the bereaved mother send her last son that his dead elder brothers may not feel forsaken. That is virtue, you will not deny, and of such sacred and much needed virtue I will make a vice. The muse, impressed but not quite sure whether she is really understood.
A very original and dramatic notion, to be sure, my lord.
And this leads me to correct what I told you just now. Did I say I took delight in nothing that requires revision? I love sacrifice.
You are a god, and all gods share that taste.
My sacrifices are genuine and wholesale, not wretched little cakes or grain or incense, or the inferior cuts of sacrificial beasts, nor the hearts uplifted in momentary fervour, mere tiny titches of what mankind produces for its own use and pleasure. My sacrifices leave nothing behind them. Unlike all other gods, I claim the whole, and I consume it all. The furnaces of Moloch smoked for me. The muse is a little taken aback at Satan's sudden emphasis of manner, and doubtful whether it's in perfect taste.
I am aware of that. Indeed, I might make bold to point out to your lordship that the muse of history can really be trusted to know such facts.
The facts, but not the meaning, nettled the muse.
You are unfair, my lord. Even Milton, though only a poet, was taught by me that every superstition, save his own, his list was just a trifle secretarian, had been invented by your lordship.
But neither your Christian Milton nor your classic self seems to have guessed that it is not the obscene rituals of Baal and Belial, nor the frenzy of mad fanaticism and monastic rule which brought the offsprings most savory to my nostrils, not Iphigenia, her white throat cut like a garlanded heaver to produce a wind, not Jepethiah's daughter bewailing her unwedded girlhood, have been the most spotless victims immolated on my altars. Not even the glorious army of martyrs, palmed and golden stoled, whose blood, O Rui, O rosy blood of virgins and of little children, was lapped up by my avenging hounds of persecution, making them ravenous for more martyred flesh. Not the countless multitude of uncanonized saints who killed self, breathed selfishness in others, not the myriad heroes, reckon them upon ever since the wars began, who died for doubtful causes or no cause at all. I have received higher oblations. Lambs more unblemished have bled for me, for all true sacrifice is sacrifice to Satan.
You are eloquent, my lord, but as so often happens nowadays with literary genius, you overstate your case and damaged it by wilful paradox. Why, it is a precept of the commonest worldly wisdom that sacrifice is at times an excellent investment, whether for the next world or for this. And all moralists have taught, even the crassest Epicureans, that life insists upon it at almost every turn.
A good investment, whether the interest be paid in heavenly glory or in earthly self compliance, is not a sacrifice, dear Cleo, and so as to what life demands at every turn, that is renunciation and endurance, since every turn of life means discrimination and choice, preference of large to less, of future to present, of lasting satisfaction to brief or tainted rapture, and in arduous, uncertain adventure with its entrancing breathlessness and heartbeat, to yawning security. Last but not least, life at every turn bids mankind renounce its appetites and its ease for mankind's most abiding comforts, the standards of the human race. Nay, it often bids the individual man renounce his race habits and commandments for the sake of the secret treasure and torment his own conscience. Sacrifice such as this, as you rightly say, of profit. But in so far it is no sacrifice, but more postponement or exchange of desired things. Satan disdains such barter of good for better. He claims absolute obliteration. My sacrifice is sheer loss, and the offering to my essential godhead is waste. A pause. The muse does not know what she is expected to answer, and murmurs merely, to be sure, of course. Thus all true sacrifice is the power of evil, and may I add, oftenest obtained by my twin servants delusion and confusion, or in other words, passion seeing everything through its own likes and dislikes, and dullness never seeing anything at all. It is most interesting to watch them at their work, heading mankind away from mankind's only efficacious helper, the harsh, responsive reality of things, thanks largely to this incompatible pair of innocent liars. I may say, without lack of modesty, that of all gods I am the one who has received the hugest holocaust of wasted virtue, hecatombs compared with which all the bulls and rams offered in Solomon's temple, all the superb butchery which smirched in the marble fairness of the antique world, are of no more account than the minutest grain of incense which a village acolyte throws on the live coals in his tinsel censer.
But at that rate, forgive me, dear Lord Satan, but history has to run the gauntlet of much impertinent why and wherefore. But at that rate, how explain that this small world still contains something, life, wealth, or virtue, which has not yet been wasted in your rites?
The question is legitimate, and alas, contains an answer fatal to my greatness. Waste, dear Cleo, by inconvenient so-called law of nature, tends in its very essence to waste itself away. And then there was a sacrifice in which, well planned though it was and daringly attempted, Satan did not succeed. You recollect the business of the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
Recollected? Why, I recorded not one but several conflicting accounts of the occurrence, especially the one now authorized and the older one official among the Chaldees, from whom our enterprising Jewish plagiarists took it, but merely to change its bearing, as so often happens when men of letters and theologians work on each other's copy. And since you have alluded to this justly popular story, I can't resist the opportunity of ascertaining once for all what precisely among such conflicting versions really was your lordship's part in that, shall we say, bad business.
Bad certainly for me, dear Cleo.
For you, my lord. Perhaps not all you aimed at, but surely you scored something, brought death into the world and all our woe, etc. That was not to be despised.
Of course not. And moreover brought me as is figured in that medieval legend which makes that self-same tree serve for the wood of a true cross. Brought me, though unsuccessful, the sublimest sacrifice my altars ever gloried in. The muse knowingly.
That has long since been my view, and sundry early Christian theologians nearer the sources, but since branded as heretical, went so far as to declare that it was to your lordship that the deity found himself obliged, like the patriarch Abraham, to offer up his son. This circumstance has indeed made me suspect that the tree in question could not have really been planted by the Creator, like some horticultural exhibit intended to be looked at but not eaten of.
The muse hesitates, looking at Satan with the embarrassment of a person not certain of having guessed the truth, and still less certain whether the truth will be welcome. Satan contemptuously, God neither planted nor forbade its use. So far your guess is right. The muse delighted.
I thought as much. Then your lordship must forgive my indiscretion, but history's greatest joy is, after all, that of an occasional shrewd look through a millstone. Then, since such really was the case, I mean that tree not being planted by God must have been planted by.
The muse looks at Satan as much as to ask by you.
In short, in other words, it was. Planted by...
Satan suddenly to the amusement and almost consternation by man and man's wife, women. The All-Creator gave the seed, but like his other seeds, the original multifold power scattered it broadcast to lie dormant or quicken or perish as might be. Man saved it from the vast indifferent lavishness, and like the ear of the wild weed put it into chosen soil, watering and cherishing it as it sprouted, that he might eat its fruit and his children shelter in its shade.
To be sure, the precise particulars had somehow escaped my memory. History has really too many things to remember.
You were not there, my dear. I was. So I will give history a little lesson in her own subject. The muse nettled in but inquisitive.
Your lordship's conversation cannot fail to be instructive.
Well then, this is the story of a tree of knowledge. In the beginning, which had no beginning, more mere timeless, aimless chaos and old night, creation stirred its creation, creating its own powers, the multifold of quickening forces making for shape from substance and for soul from motion. I was not born yet. The muse still irritated.
That much is not unknown. You were an afterthought, my dear Lord Satan, as befits a rebel.
Not a rebel, Clio, but like many who pass such a staunch conservative, I opposed the coming change loyal to the chaos and darkness who had given me birth. I resolved to turn this new-fangled order into anarchy. So when soul quickens within body, I saw it clogging it by body's clinging habits, and in return unsettled secure instincts with half-fledged reason. Man was not yet, hence neither good nor evil, but in the lowest brutes already pain and pleasure emerged, the great creative pulse determining life's tides, and at once I seized upon them for my purpose, employing pleasure to increase pain. Then, as your Milton put it, I sought in good the means to evil. So soon as good and evil came along with man, and to his purpose I sought to turn that tree planted from God's seed in God's great park, warping its growth, and when it grew despite me, filling its fruitful branches with chimeras and harpies of all foul kinds.
That is truly interesting. But may I point out that your lordship's nomenclature
And
lacks a trifle in precision? At one moment you call the tree in question tree of knowledge, at another tree of good and evil.
they are the same, for unknown good is not good, nor evil evil. Words betoken man's choice and answering to man's needs.
I see. That would account for man's planting that particular tree instead of, well, your lordship?
Satan looks at the muse in amusement. Instead of me? Of me, dear Clio? Oh, history, you are a great goose. You are a greater goose than I had ever guessed. Why, that tree's planting means my doom, however long postponed by my manifold arts. That tree, why, I've attacked it with 100-fold devices. Droughts, hurricanes, and loathsome parasites, and the obscene snouts of devils turned to swine. I've bled its sap, stripped off its bark, and seared roots and branches with frost and fire, urged man to cut it down, lest it should prove a upas and strangle all his children in its growth. I've borrowed all Jove's official lightnings to blast it. I've seen it parch and wither, branch drop off after branch, crop mildew after crop, but alas, only to note with anguish new blossoms and ever unexpected shoots. I, Satan, plant that hateful holy tree, oh Clio, Clio, that even you could think, why that tree which clasps with 100 branches and the willing heavens, is at the same time delving its million roots and rootless deeper and further into chaos and darkness, narrowing and squeezing this hell of mine, till it become no bigger than its pretty little hands of yours. I will tell you a secret, Cleo. Absurd as it at present sounds, some day there will be no more room for Satan.
Indeed. That is, I own, a most disheartening supposition, and accounts for a slight vein of, may I call it, morbidness, which I have grieved to notice in your lordship's previous remarks. I must not, however, hide from you that there have been rumours to the effect of Satan being, well, more correctly described as long-lived than as immortal in the literal sense. If this be true, let me remind you of the saying of that enlightened ruler Sardanapalus: eat, drink, and be merry. The rest is not worth a fig.
Satan ironically pressing her hand. Dear gossip history, not Job's comforter, but Satan's.
And I think what opportunities you still have before you, although you have made clear to me that it is a case, as the poet so charmingly puts it, of gathering your rosebuds while you may. A European war lasting for years may surely be accounted such, for that, if I'm correctly informed, is the subject of the new ballet to which you have so graciously invited poor Cleo.
Satan kissing her fingertips gallantly. "Ah, just so, my leash of life. Though good for many thousand years is shortening, shrinking with every great success of mine, like the peau de chagrin in Balzac's romance. I may, however, tell you that there is another and more pressing reason why I have hurried on this great new spectacle.
The present moment is eminently propitious by one or two leaders of modern thought who frequent my saloon, that mankind has attained amazing control over science's means without so far an inkling of science's discipline and aims. 20th century man appeared to be slum and warehouse savages, retaining the worship of all the good old tribal fetishes and racy obscene emblems, and carry on their ancient cannibal habits under new-fangled and decent names, yet at the same time wielding, thanks to some dozen men of genius,
Waste of genius, waste of science. There you have a trifling sample of my sport. The muse not to be interrupted.
wielding, as I said, appliances which, without enlarging mind or heart, abolish space and multiply all brutish powers a thousandfold. If this account is true, no moment could be better suited for a dance of death, such as the poor unsophisticated Middle Ages never imagined in their most celebrated nightmares.
Satan, who has politely suppressed a yawn. You are more rightly informed, as benefits the muse of history. But that is not the most urgent reason for hurrying on this my monster entertainment between you and me in the very strictest confidence. Dear Cleo, my ballet master Death is growing old.
You have hinted something to that effect, and I confess that I have myself noticed, not without the deepest concern, that our genial friend has been looking anything but well of late, and seems to be losing some of his faculties. He is said to have been a great dog in his prime, loving excess for its own sake, and it is whispered addicted more and more to eccentric pleasures. Such lack of self-restraint tells, alas, even on the most robust constitutions in the long run. Dear old ballet master Death, vieux marcheur, as the French classics say, and now getting un peu gaga, I fear.
Yes, still pretty spry, but tabetic, and threatened with creeping paralysis. His constitution, though I say it, who should not, was never really good. Since his poor dear mother was always somewhat of an invalid, and the intermarriage of very close relations does not, alas, result in a robust offspring. Well, well, I shall be the first to suffer for these particulars of my youth. My poor old nephew, alas, dear Cleo, my dear incomparable ballet master Death is not with us for very much longer.
You have my deepest sympathy in your, well, more than paternal anxiety. But there is no real danger. I mean, danger of, surely? I see, as everyone must see, that Ballet Master Death is no longer what he was, and that science, I begin to understand the prejudice you show against the tree of knowledge, has almost, as an Irishman might say, been the death of him. He has been warned of one pestilence after another. Famines are growing scarce, and except in the mystic Orient, religious massacres are everywhere marked trespass. Such constant interference cannot fail to tell on his sensitive nerves and spoil poor Death's temper, which was never very good. But I am glad to remember that in this case you never ever apprehend the very worst. Death, at all events, can never die outright. He and the creative power, élan vital, as my friend Bergson calls it, are the two immortals. Immortals.
Not this death.
This death?
Not my ballet master, my jester in ordinary, my rowdy boon companion, my incomparable, atrocious, grim, leering, lewd, worm-eaten scarecrow. He, alas, can die, and to my sorrow will, the immortal is the other.
The other what?
The other death, the true one. For although history has not grasped that secret, our ballet master merely usurps his name and functions. The muse scared.
In that case, what on earth is your ballet master's real name?
He has too many different names to be called by one single one, unless that name be horror. He is wasting sickness, pestilence, famine, contamination, crime, and war. That being the case, man in speaking of him must often use and profane the sacred name of death. This one, my ballet master, is, as Milton indiscreetly printed and published, a very near and dear relative of mine, born in my salad days of sin. Another very near relative, all of us children and grandchildren, more or less incestuous, as you know, of the primeval chaos.
Believe me, dear Lord Satan, I had no intention of raking up such intimate family details. But tell me about this other one, this true death, since you have called him that.
Yes, the true death. He has been my enemy since the beginning. Like me, he is an archangel, but mightier. The great natural death, twin of sleep and foster brother of love, he was born by virgin birth, of life herself, to be the marshal of life's triumphal progress. He is not often seen of man, although he works obtusely some inanimate things, and his serene face shines through the autumn woods, and thus it comes about that my ballet master usurps his part and name. Yet at times poets and sages have caught glimpses of his tender eyes, and in brief lulls of evil, when light irradiated some tiniest corner of the world, favored peoples have had brief visions of him, he or heard the quiet rustle of his wings. True death is that grave, gracious genius, brother of the sad, sweet Hermes, who conducts the souls carved by Ionian masons on the great pillar of Eupheus, naked and winged and lovely, marshalling life's slow triumphant triumph. For he is for he it is who makes room for newcomers in just turn, securing the world for youth and betterment. He also brings perfect peace to those whose other wishes have been filled brimful or cruelly denied, and he leads by the hand of that love who often lurks unconscious till loss awakens to its sweet solemn plenitude. Such is the true death, the natural, beneficent, and also the immortal. Satan passing his hands across his brow. But with him, dear muse of history, Satan has no truck. And now the moment nears when we must ascend from this silent nest of brooding evil to meet my death. Satan's obscene, uproarious ballet master, whose manifold pranks convert the earth into the real hell which silly mortals fable here below. Is there anything you would still ask me to explain, dear old Cleo?
There is indeed, my lord. We have talked so much philosophy, very instructive, no doubt, but just a little bit too abstract for my taste, that I have had no opportunity of so much as inquiring the title of your new ballet and the names of its performers. I understand it is to be serious, not comic?
The greatest tragedies, dear Cleo, being founded on error, and never without an element of the grotesque, but this ludicrous side always escapes those who take part in them. For if they saw the full absurdity, they would refuse to act these frightful scenes. They take it seriously, poor creatures, and no wonder. But to you, dear muse of history, and your friends of the idle ages to come, this ballet of the nations, for that it's his title, will be an unending source of rhetoric, mistaken lessons, and of such voluptuous horror as thrill the Vestal virgins in their cushioned seats high above the arena. And I doubt whether your elevated taste, but I forgot you to consent to anecdote, will quite appreciate the preposterous which underlies it all. But to return, the corps de ballet is of course composed of the various nations, as the name imports. For the necessary music, I have a choice band of human passions, those who hide their face and are cried fly, to be distinguished persons like yourself and the others who go handsomely masked and stilled, some also on the simplest, purest, noblest idealism, love of adventure, pity, and indignation. Above all, heroism.
And patriotism, first most.
Nay, patriotism is the collective name of the whole orchestra, whom I train for these performances. Human passions, splendid or sordid, delicate or nasty, all seated cheek by jowl, playing their instruments, without whose steady flow of sublime music and nerve-rending din of the nations could not dance their dance of death, obedience to my great ballet. Master's bateau. To keep to keep this music up, drinks will be handed round by my well-trained lackeys of the press and pulpit, hot and acrid for coarse palates, or heady and full of fuddling fumes. Also subtler ones, such as make everyday trifles seem to the opium dreamers vast and rainbow wonderful. Plentiful deep draughts of words, words and ever more words, concocted in my special distillery, by learned recluses like those who white-robed monks who manufacture fiery liqueurs in remote Alpine glens. Thus, as I hope, or else by other arts, sundry among the virtues will leave their stalls and join in with my band, and those too shocked to join will drop to sleep and dream of man's purification through suffering. Satan laughs quietly, the muse considerably louder, clapping her hands.
One word more, my lord. In the priceless biographical notes which your kindness has vouchsafed me, I remarked that as interviewers put these things, your favourite pastime
And chief business in life, the muse consulting a memorandum,
is, have I got it down correctly, is
Satan impatiently, is waste. Keep that well in mind, dear Cleo. It is the key to all I ever do, and therefore to my coming ballet. The muse, meticulously still fingering her notes.
it was with reference to the coming performance that I inquired. Waste. Well, of course, waste of human life, wealth, tears, properties, liberties of all kinds. Moreover,
Satan interrupting.
mm,
And more to my purpose even, waste of the intelligence, unselfishness, and effort which should have rid the world of many false other evils. The muse going on particularly.
Moreover, as those fashionable cranks who call themselves eugenists tell us, waste also of the inheritable vigor of the race, only shirkers and varicose persons, and such as make war profits or are elderly, remaining over to reproduce the genus Homo. Is that correct, my lord?
As far as it goes, but such gross and obvious wastefulness is not my highest aim. Satan is no materialist, my dear Muse, and for him mere life and happiness must never be the things men put most store by. You may have heard this doctrine preached elsewhere than here, in fact by the moralists and divines ever since the world began.
I have heard it, and I'm happy to say I hear it still on all hands, but with the addition, saving your lordship's presence, that this doctrine emanates, well, to put it plainly, from God.
That God, dear unsuspecting Cleo, was Satan in disguise. It is possible that history has not yet made a note of some, at least of the many aliases to which my business obliges me to have resource from time to time. But to return, what were we talking about? To be sure, self-sacrifice. Well, take my word for it, the great creative reality whom men call God or nature, has no taste for barren flowers of virtue. It is Satan who grows them with much care and pride. I think I told you the lamentable fact that I am impotent to take delight in anything, with one expectation. The odor of such sanctity as bears no fruit ravishes my disembodied senses, as beseems the saints in whom I nurture it amidst me back to heavenly joys. Virtue for virtue's own sake, that is what I ask for, since to the genuine connoisseur in spiritual rarities, to the full-fledged moral estate that I am the beauty of self-sacrifice must never be marred by base utility. My coming ballet will make that clear to you. You shall hear the devastating blast of indignation's wings and pity's unforgiving sobs. You shall be shown young heroism's radiant face, as blind as a stone statue. But I notice there is something more you want me to explain.
Um, your lordship has been so generous of information that, in short, I fear my notes may present some slight obscurity or incoherence when I come to reread them. Um, is it asking too great a favor to say how deeply grateful I should be if you would repeat once more your leading definition of yourself?
With the greatest pleasure. Dictates, I am the waster of all sorts of virtue. The muse bows effusive thanks. But hark! Cerberus once more at his alarms. Go, dear muse of history, those must be your friends, the vain and bodiless but most effective ages to come. Please open to them. The muse disappears and bolts are heard being drawn. Meanwhile, Satan throws himself back wearily in his corner of the sofa, passes his hands over his eyes, and mutters meditatively to himself, "The Ballet of Nations, my new masterpiece, and, as I sometimes fear, the last of its time-honored sort. Well, if the last, let it be the greatest." The muse returns, introducing the chorus of ages to come, classically draped and veiled in the stuff that dreams are made of. Chorus of ages to come, you are very obedient, humble servants at your archangelic lordship commands. They curtsy to the ground. Satan has risen to meet them and waves a gracious greeting to each member of the chorus. Pray do not speak like that, delightful ages to come. Why, not in half an hour ago I was remarking to our illustrious friend Cleo that besides her own there is no applause I covet as much as that of your most alluring and elusive selves, and like her you are much more than a mere audience, though the most appreciative. History helps me in my shows with her so-called lessons, which, as you know, always incalculate the great untruth that there is nothing new under the sun. And history also makes it her business to keep old wounds from healing, and sees to hatred flourishing like the green bay of victory. Thus the past, or what passes muster as past, collaborate with Satan. You ever disembodied ages to come represent the no less needed assistance of a no less apocyrial future. Aprocifrial future. The future which is always the future because it can never turn into the present, and which therefore possesses the unparalleled attraction of what can be pursued but never cluttered. The same prestige, in fact, enjoyed in pious days by the old-fashioned kingdom of heaven, making man eager to sacrifice the peace and happiness of a tangible today for the sake of the peace and happiness of an unsubstantial tomorrow, spun like cobweb out of their own sick brains. But enough! Come, my vicious chorus of unrealities, come, great recorder of all that does and does not happen. Let us ascend from hell's brooding stillness to the world's theatre, which awaits you, its eternal patrons, and its lessee and manager, myself. Satan signs to the ages to come, the troop off in front, and follows, offering his arms to the muse of history. End of part 1. Nice. Super.
Oh.
Super, wat fijn. Jeetje.
Ja, man. Wat een tekst.
Ja, het is wel een mooie tekst. Alleen de woorden zijn af en toe dat zijn de valkuilen waar we dan een beetje moeten verkennen hoe we er overheen komen. Maar wat je vindt, vertel, wat vind je ervan?
Ja, geniaal.
Het was een tijd ver vooruit, die schrijfster.
Ja, heel bijzonder. Heel geestig.
Ja, mooi. Ik vind het een hele speciale tekst. Ik heb nog nooit zoiets gelezen. Het is ook met de klassiek van Iphigenia en zo. En Moloch en al die dingen die ze erbij haalt. Het zijn wel...
Ja, schitterend. Ja.
Maar mooi, fijn.
Ja.
Dan gaan we een andere keer verder met deel 2.
Ja.